What would you do if the person you spent 30 years with stood up in the middle of a family dinner and told everyone he was leaving you? Like you were just the final line in a story he'd already rewritten without you. Would you cry, scream, walk out? I didn't. I stayed seated. And I smiled. That evening we were at a cozy little restaurant on Clark Street. The lighting was soft and golden, and a gentle stream of jazz played in the background. Henry's family had gathered to celebrate his mother June's 60th birthday, a woman I had always respected. For long tables were filled with family and old friends. People were laughing, telling stories, raising glasses in celebration. And I was sitting next to Henry, my husband, the man who had been by my side for nearly half my life. We'd been together 30 years, built a life from nothing, shared everything: dreams, failures, late-night worries, early morning hopes. People called us a model couple, and for a long time I believed them. But when Henry stood up in the middle of that dinner, lifted his wine glass, and began to speak, I knew this wasn't a toast. He spoke clearly, with a calm that only comes when someone's been rehearsing their exit for a while. I think it's time to be honest, he said. Nora and I have shared a long road together, but I've decided it's time to take a different path. I need a fresh start. The room froze. The clinking of cutlery stopped midair. Someone nearly dropped their glass of wine. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes turn to me, waiting for me to break. But I didn't give them what they were looking for. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I didn't ask him why. I just smiled. Not because I was weak, but because I already knew. I had been prepared. Because silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're the one who holds the power. I reached into my handbag, pulled out a cream-colored envelope, and placed it gently next to Henry's glass. He looked at me, puzzled. What's this? I answered, calmly and steady. Something for you to read after dinner. Then I turned to June and offered her a soft smile. Next, I looked at my daughter, Olivia, who had just gotten engaged 3 weeks earlier. Her face had gone pale, her lips trembling. I took her hand, kissed her forehead, and whispered, It's still Grandma's birthday. Don't let anything take that away from you. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked out of the restaurant slowly, gracefully. Behind me I heard chairs shifting, people calling my name. And then, Henry's voice. No longer calm, no longer confident, but high-pitched, shaky, losing control. Nora, what the hell is this? What did you do? I didn't turn around, because I knew what I had left on that table, in that envelope, was the beginning of an ending he couldn't manage. I had once hoped he would be the man I'd grow old with. I used to believe that if I just loved enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, he wouldn't betray me. But that night taught me my first real lesson. Backhand index pointing right: people don't betray you out of the blue. They just finally say out loud what they've been quietly preparing for a long time. And if you haven't been quietly preparing your own exit, you'll be the only one left behind. That night I didn't go home right away. I drove along Lake Michigan, rolled the window down, and let the December wind hit my face. And no, what I felt wasn't heartbreak. It was something lighter, strangely freeing, like I had finally exhaled after years of holding my breath. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing. I hadn't fallen apart, and I was finally ready to rewrite the story of my life, for the first time on my own terms. What they didn't see was everything I gave up. Chapter 2. That night when I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, a lot of people thought I was unbelievably strong. Some messaged me, some called. A few told me I was brave. Others leaned in and quietly asked, How long have you known? But no one asked the question that actually mattered. What did you have to give up to make that decision? And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. I met Henry when I was 21, a senior majoring in psychology, dreaming of becoming a full-time professor. He was 2 years older, taking real estate classes after dropping out of an MBA program. I loved the way he believed in big dreams. He said I made him feel safe, like home. We got married right after I graduated. I'd been accepted into a master's program in New York, with a scholarship and a small apartment that looked out over Washington Square Park. But Henry had just launched his first business in Chicago, so I gave it all up. The scholarship, the apartment, the dream, to become his support system instead. I'll go back to school later, I told myself. but later never came. I worked part-time as a community college instructor. It didn't pay much, but it was just enough to cover the mortgage and raise our daughter. Henry jumped from project to project, real estate, interior design, even a short stint in event planning. And every time he hit restart, I trimmed the budget, took on more hours, and made it all work. I never resented him. Truly I didn't. Because I believed that if I stayed steady long enough, he would eventually succeed. And I believed that a family was something worth sacrificing for. But looking back, I can't even remember the last time I bought myself a new blouse. I do remember the time Henry missed Olivia's birthday. She was turning 7. He said he had a critical client meeting. So I decorated the living room myself with dollar store balloons and a handmade banner. Olivia kept checking the door, thinking her dad would walk in just in time to blow out the candles. He never came. Over time I spoke less. I became the one behind the camera in every photo. The one in the kitchen during every holiday. The one missing from her own dreams. I know there are women out there like me. Women who whisper to themselves, as long as my family is happy, I'm happy too. But happiness should never come at the cost of erasing yourself. Henry never once asked if I was tired. He never noticed the nights I stayed up until 2 a.m., trying to figure out how to pay Olivia's tuition without touching our emergency savings. And those things, the sacrifices, the silent efforts, people never see. They just saw me sitting quietly at that dinner. They didn't see the years I spent holding together a family that was already falling apart. The lesson I learned? Sometimes you give so much of yourself that people forget you ever had anything left to lose. And the saddest part isn't that they forget. It's that you forget who you used to be. I once read something that stayed with me. Women don't shatter all at once. They crack piece by piece, every time their feelings are pushed aside. And I think I have been cracking for years. That night I didn't fall apart, because I had already broken long ago. What about you? Have you ever sacrificed something big for someone, only to realize no one even noticed? Backhand index pointing right if you have. Share your story below. Someone out there may need to hear it, just to know they're not alone. I don't blame Henry for leaving. I just wish that when he finally walked away, he had understood everything I had already given up for him for 30 years. But that's about to change. Because I've started reviewing the receipts, the bank transfers, and I'm realizing there was a whole side of him he never told me about. I used to think that if someone was planning to leave you, they'd at least show some signs. A distant tone, a shift in body language, a growing silence you could feel. But with Henry there was nothing. He still ate dinner with me. He still called Olivia every night to say goodnight. He still talked about new real estate deals that were about to change everything. But the words he said didn't match what I was seeing in our credit card statements. It started late one night while I was searching for a health insurance bill to file taxes. In the recent transactions section of our joint account, there it was, $642 spent at a high-end furniture store in a suburb I didn't even recognize. I frowned. We hadn't bought anything new. Our house was fully furnished. Maybe it was a gift for a client? But Henry had never been that generous. I began scrolling back through the previous months. Charges from a boutique spa, a fancy Italian restaurant we'd never dined at together, a jewelry store with a charge just under $1,200. And then one transaction hit harder than the rest. A weekend hotel booking in Traverse City, a lakeside resort town 5 hours from our home. It was the same weekend he told me he'd be away, meeting a client from California. I had lived with this man for 30 years. I thought I knew him. But the more I read through those cold, emotionless transaction logs, the more I felt like they were telling me the truth he never would. I didn't ask. I didn't confront. I didn't rage. I took notes. With the precision of a woman who had managed the family budget for 3 decades, I documented every purchase, every date, every transaction code. I downloaded the reports, saved the emails, called businesses to confirm charges. Then one morning, Henry left his phone on the kitchen counter. And that's when I saw it. A message popped up from Chelsea D. It read, "Deposits in. This apartment is definitely ours." I didn't open the phone. I didn't need to. I just knew. Chelsea. I'd met her once, briefly, at a networking event Henry hosted. She shook my hand, called me ma'am, and said Henry was an amazing mentor. I remember the gleam in her eyes. Back then I thought it was admiration. Now I knew better. I didn't confront him, not right away. I didn't want to derail everything Olivia had been working toward. Her engagement, her new job, the life she was just starting to rebuild after the pandemic. I chose silence, but not ignorance. I met with an attorney. I brought her a folder filled with small receipts that carried big meaning. I said, I don't want revenge. I just want what I've given for 30 years back. What did I learn? Words can lie. But money doesn't know how to lie. If you really want to know who someone is, don't listen to their promises. Watch where their money goes. What about you? Have you ever noticed something small, seemingly insignificant, that completely changed the way you saw someone you trusted? Backhand index pointing right if you have. Share it in the comments. Your story might be the wake-up call someone else needs to hear. Henry thought he was still in control. He had a new woman. He had a plan for a clean, elegant exit. What he didn't know was that I had a plan too. And mine was quiet, thorough, and entirely legal. I'm no longer the woman waiting for her husband to come home late. I'm the woman ready to leave, before he even finishes packing his bags. When a man plans to leave you, he usually thinks he's the only one holding the script. But in my case, he was wrong. Henry thought he'd be the one to end it all on his own terms. But while he was busy putting a deposit down on a new apartment with Chelsea, I was quietly opening a different kind of door. Not a door to leave, but a door to step back into myself. I started with the smallest things. I opened a bank account, in my name only. No joint access. No one else on the paperwork. Just me. Then I met Linda Bowers, a retired attorney who lived in our neighborhood. She had spent decades providing legal guidance for widowed and divorced women in our community. I brought her a folder, neatly labeled, color-coded, carefully organized. Every transfer, every receipt, every note I'd taken over the past few months. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. You've done the work of a forensic accountant. But what impresses me most isn't the evidence. It's your calm. While clearing out an old storage box, I found our prenup, the one Henry insisted we signed 30 years ago. Back then, my father had just passed and left me a small inheritance. Henry said the agreement was to protect us both. I didn't think much of it. I loved him. I trusted him. But reading it again now, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A clause about financial honesty, stating that if either party was dishonest with shared finances, the other had the right to retain a majority of the marital assets. Henry forgot about that clause, but I didn't. While working with my attorney, I also began reclaiming the parts of me I'd left behind. I visited a local women's community center that supported older women starting over after divorce or widowhood. There I met women just like me, women who had been pushed to the sidelines of their own lives. I started sketching out a plan to open a small financial counseling office dedicated to women navigating crisis and change. I didn't know if it would succeed, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something for me. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's support system, just me. The more I prepared, the more I realized. Henry had no idea. A full week before his mother's birthday dinner, I had already finalized the divorce paperwork, requested a freeze on our joint accounts, and filed the summons with the court, holding it in place until I decided when it would be served. And I chose the day he planned to leave me. What did I learn? Silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. When you're no longer crying, begging, or breaking down, it's not always because you've stopped loving. It's because you finally realized your worth is no longer something that needs proving. I know some people might say I was calculating, but I wasn't out for revenge. I was reclaiming fairness. For myself. For the years I gave up. For the woman who once dreamed of living a life that actually felt like hers. Backhand index pointing right. What about you? Have you ever quietly prepared for a major life change, while no one around you even suspected a thing? If so, leave a comment. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to feel a little less alone. Henry thought he'd make a clean exit. A graceful pivot into a new life with a younger woman. No obligations, no consequences. What he didn't know was that I had a plan too. And mine was stronger, smarter, and entirely fair. I used to think that when a marriage ends there has to be a winner and a loser. But over time I learned that's not always true. Sometimes saying goodbye doesn't mean you've lost anything at all. Sometimes it simply means you're finding your way back to yourself. After that night at the birthday dinner, Henry called me over and over again. Sometimes calm, sometimes furious, sometimes saying, "Let's talk like adults," other times accusing, "You're ruining everything." I never responded, not because I wanted to win, but because I knew there's no conversation that can heal a person who already left you in their heart long ago and waited for just the right moment to spin the story in their favor. Our first court hearing fell on the same week Olivia started her new job in Boston. I didn't say a word to her until everything was finalized. When she finally found out, she held me tight, tears in her eyes, and said, "I had no idea you were carrying all this by yourself for so long." I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was at peace. Because I had protected my daughter from having her youth weighed down by the cracks in our marriage. Henry lost most of his assets, thanks to the financial honesty clause in our prenup. The apartment he was planning to move into with Chelsea never happened. She walked away once she realized the financial life he promised wasn't real. A few old friends called me later, told me he was sad, lost, alone. I listened quietly, then simply said, "I hope one day he finds himself, the way I finally found me." I didn't rush into a new relationship. I didn't reinvent myself overnight or fly away to some far-off city. I just started living again, bit by bit. I went back to teaching. But this time, I added a new course, financial literacy for adult women. I started a small support group called Women Reclaiming Power. It became a space for divorced, widowed, or single women to learn how to manage money, plan their futures, and most importantly, put themselves at the center of their own lives again. One Friday afternoon, while I was making tea in my little office, a middle-aged woman walked in. Her eyes were red. She said, "A friend told me your story. I didn't think anyone out there could possibly understand how I feel. Until I found you." We sat together for almost an hour. When she left, she had a budget plan, a checklist for life after separation, and a little bit of hope in her eyes. That's when I realized I hadn't just lost a marriage. I had found meaning again. I was no longer someone's wife. I was Nora Mitchell, and I was back. The last lesson I learned? Not every goodbye is the end. Sometimes it's the softest way to stop, so you can finally begin again. Backhand index pointing right. What about you? Has a door ever closed in your life, only to reveal something better waiting behind it? Tell me your story in the comments. Your words may be the strength someone else needs to get through a chapter they're still struggling to close. Movie camera. If you saw yourself in this story, if you've ever given too much, or you're still learning how to stand back up after being left behind, then Quiet Revenge Tales is a place for you. Here we share real stories told with a gentle voice, and the wisdom that only experience brings. So you don't just listen, you feel. Love letter. Hit that subscribe button, because the next video might be the words you need to hear, right when you need them most.